The American people are rejoicing. 50-year-old Franklin Delano Roosevelt has been elected President of the United States. He is expected to lead the country out of the Great Depression, an economic crisis that had flared up in 1929. In his first speech, Roosevelt spoke a phrase that came to define the entire generation.
That the only thing we have to fear is fear itself.
Roosevelt promptly implemented a number of important reforms during his first 100 days in office. The Federal Reserve System was allowed to issue loans to a limited number of banks. Prohibition was abolished. Farmers were compensated for reducing the area under crops and for downsizing meat and milk production. The National Industrial Recovery Act, NIRA, allowed the government to determine product output volumes and product range. Roosevelt declared a war on unemployment. There were now 2 people working a single job, but at lower wages. Roosevelt's New Deal yielded substantial results, making it possible to build over 700,000 miles of new roads, 77,000 bridges, and 285 airports. It became possible to forget the crisis. As a result, Roosevelt won a landslide victory in the 1936 presidential elections. In November of 1933, the United States established diplomatic relations with the Soviet Union. This became a serious foreign policy initiative, and more so since US-Russian diplomatic relations had been severed after the November 1917 Bolshevik Revolution. With the onset of World War II, FDR signed the Lend-Lease Act, making it possible to assist the victims of Nazi aggression. The document was signed in 1940, the year FDR was elected president for the 3rd time. Under the Lend-Lease Act, the Soviet Union received military equipment, ammunition, food, and strategic raw materials worth an impressive amount, over $11 billion US. After the war, some opportunistic assessment of the Lend-Lease Act called it insignificant. Other assessments claimed that it did not decide the outcome of the war, but that it had shortened the road to victory. This would happen later. In the 1940s, however, FDR was seeking to avoid all-out US involvement in the European War. This policy came to an abrupt end on December 7, 1941, after the unexpected Japanese attack on the US naval base at Pearl Harbor. The very next day, the United States and the British Empire declared war on Japan. 3 days later, Germany and Italy declared war on the United States. The famous scientist Albert Einstein, who had emigrated from Nazi Germany to the United States, received reports that Nazis could develop the use of atomic weapons. A concerned Einstein wrote to FDR asking him to promptly start working on the atomic bomb. FDR agreed with the eminent physicist, and the United States invested an astonishing $2.5 billion US in the Manhattan Project. FDR would not live to see the first nuclear explosion in history, which took place on July 16, 1945. In 1943, Tehran hosted the first conference between all of the big 3 Allied leaders: Franklin Delano Roosevelt, Winston Spencer Churchill, and Joseph Stalin. Following the defeat of Nazi forces near Stalingrad, FDR made sharp changes to his wait-and-see stance regarding the opening of the Second Front. He did not support British Prime Minister Churchill, who still shied away from resolving this issue. The Second Front was opened 6 months later, on June 6, 1944, when US, British, and Canadian forces commanded by General Dwight David Eisenhower, aka Ike, landed in Normandy, in northern France. The landing at Normandy was followed by the August 15th landing in southern France. By late January 1945, Allied forces had crossed the German border. On 25th, 1945, they linked up near Torgau on the Elbe River. In February 1945, Yalta in the Crimea hosted another Big 3 conference, which formalized all the major decisions regarding the future division of the world among the victorious Allied nations. FDR had hoped very much that US-Soviet cooperation would continue after the war, though he was not destined to carry out his plan. On April 12, 1945, FDR suffered a brain hemorrhage and sadly died. The eminent 20th century politician, FDR will go down in history as a statesman who brought his country out of a crisis, who won the war, and most importantly, who gave his people the realization that they were citizens of a great country.